Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven. Today, our special guest is Tracy Wolff. So Tracy is the #1 New York Times, #1 internationally, #1 Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling author of the Crave series, as well as many other novels. A lover of mythology, vampires, and getting lost in the great book, she spent her whole life asking what if and what happens next, questions being a writer that has helped her answer again and again. At 6 years old, she wrote her first short story, Something with a Rainbow, Unicorn, and Shape-Shifting Prince, and at 7, she forayed into the wonderful world of middle-grade literature with her first Judy Blume novel. A one-time English professor, she now devotes all her time to writing fun, action-packed romantic stories with fantastical worlds and characters who leap off the page. She has written all her 70-plus novels from her home in Austin, Texas, which she shares with her partner, her sons, and her 3 adorable dogs. So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so you've written so many books. So tell me, how did it get started? And I get in the beginning you're probably writing for yourself, and then later you got published. So how did it come to this point?
I mean, I think I've always written. Like, I think from the time I always say from the time that I learned that words made sentences and sentences made stories that I could use to entertain people, that's like it's just kind of been a passion for me. I wrote my first short story at 6. My parents weren't writers, but my father was a natural born storyteller. And when I was very young, he was a big believer in the imagination. And we would just be sitting around and he'd be like, "Oh, listen, what do you hear?" And we'd like, do all these different sense act, stuff just for fun. Or he'd be like, "Tell me a story about that shirt," or "Tell me a story about your stuffed animal," or "Tell me a story about that tree out there." And it just kind of came very, very early and very, very naturally, I think, into my life. All the way through school, it was what I loved doing. English was always my favorite classes. I always knew I wanted to be a professional writer. When I was in graduate school, I got married and had a baby pretty quickly, and that kind of put things on hold for a little while, as having to work and support and like write a thesis and do all the things kind of does. And so when my second child was born, he was born prematurely and he had really bad lungs. And the doctor had told me that if I could stay home a year, well, if one of us could stay home, and it was me, if one of us could stay home with him for a year, we had a chance of really helping to clear up his lungs, like keeping him out of daycare and getting sick, and like really give him a much better life. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer when it's your child. So I stayed home and I actually wrote my first 2 novels. And in that year, while he was napping, and late at night, while both kids were sleeping, and at that point, sorry, I just noticed something on the screen. At that point, I actually entered 2 contests. Harlequin Romance was running a contest or a couple contests at that time, and I placed in one of them, came in like first or second in the other. And anyway, that kind of got me in the door. One of the books they rejected said it wasn't really like for that line. The other one ended up getting accepted for publication. That's how I got my agent. And then that second book that had been rejected by Harlequin sold to Penguin, like a couple weeks after I got my agent. And that is kind of how my professional writing career started. And I have been doing this ever since. And that was the first one came out in fall 2007, and the next one came out in January 2008. And I've been writing ever since.
So while you were doing this, did you quit your job to do this full-time writing, or?
Eventually I have. I actually taught um, from the time like I was a professional writer, I taught college English at my local community college. And I stayed doing that up until the pandemic. And right around the pandemic is, when I went under, and then the Crave series came out in the pandemic and took off. And now I travel so much that it's not really feasible for me to be in a classroom because I'm going to Europe, or I'm traveling around doing book signings, or I'm, touring or doing whatever. And it's not feasible really anymore. And I do miss it. But yeah, no, for the most part, with the exception of a couple very short, like if I took a semester off or something, I taught pretty much all the way through until the pandemic.
Tell me a bit about this Crave series and what inspired it.
Oh, the Crave series is a young adult vampire series. And I'm trying to think. I'm actually balanced on the very first book. Um, if you give me a
Uh-oh.
second. Uh, this is the cover of the first book. And it was not my first New York Times bestseller, but it was my first like series that hit number one and hit number one in various countries and all that. And this series is about, it's a fish out of water. Grace's parents die. She's orphaned and she has to go live. She's from San Diego. She has to go live in Alaska um, at a boarding school run by like her surviving relatives, her uncle, and then her cousin Macy is a student there. And when she gets there, like I think at first she's like something's not right. Like I don't know what's wrong here, but something's not right. And there's like, of course, a very hot guy who is like, hey, you shouldn't be here. And yet they kind of fall for each other anyway. And he ends up actually not being the hero. The hero shows up in book two. But yeah, she figures out pretty quickly. At first, she's like, "Are you aliens?" And she's like, "Nope, not aliens. Oh, just vampires and witches and dragons and werewolves." And she finds out she's a gargoyle, and the whole series is kind of about that.
And
And
now
it's
you have a
about
new one, Aftermath. So can you
oh
tell
yes,
us?
my new one, Aftermath. I am super excited about. It is. I actually have that one here. I have the arc. It comes out in February. And it is my foray into middle grade. I've written for my whole career. I've written contemporary romance, romantasy, young adult, different kinds of young adult fantasy, young adult contemporaries, all of that. And but as an English teacher, I had started out while I was like early on before I started teaching college. I was teaching middle school and high school, and it always bothered me, like when I was teaching English, obviously because that's my love, that when these students came to me, like they hated reading. Like anytime, like I'm like, okay, this is what we're gonna be reading. No matter like how much time I put into selecting the book or how like interesting I tried to make it for them, like it was a misery. And I was like, when kids first start out, right? Like I had
Yeah,
little kids at that time. They love reading. They love story time at night. They look forward to it. They love story time during like preschool. So what happens between then and when they're high school students or like seventh or eighth graders that turns them off to reading so much? And it's been something that's like bothered me like my entire career. Um, and I kind of partnered with Simon&Schuster, and we're like, let's go get them. Let's go figure this out, and like let's get into the classrooms, and like let's get hopefully get people excited or kids excited about reading again. Because I know, and I'm not saying obviously like we're the only ones. Like certainly all middle grade authors are like writing gorgeous
I'm
and
sure all
amazing,
the publishers are trying. But
like
yeah,
right, but like and then there's these gorgeous like brilliant beautiful books coming out, and I'm like such a fan of them. Like my new obsession is like the Swifts. I don't know if you've read that middle grade book yet, but like it's one of the most charming books I've like ever read in middle grade in my life. And so anyway, I love Greek gods. I wanted to write a middle grade forever, and we just did it. And it's my take on herstory, actually, kind of like history gets written by the winners and very rarely do they get it right. And so my girl Penelope ends up at this school, Anaximander's Academy. And the whole thing is like a logic problem. Like the campus is built like a Rubik's Cube. So every day you have to figure out the lay of the land because everything is shifted overnight. Because Anaximander was one of the first Greek philosophers. And anyway, she's there. You're divided into these halls, and each one is for a different Greek god. She thinks she's going to be put into one hall. She's like very studious and all this, and then she ends up in the party hall instead. And she's like, everything in my life has gone wrong. And but we take on a different myth each book, and the first book is Pandora's box because it's always bothered me that I think Pandora gets a bad rap. She was created by two men, right? To open a box as a punishment to two other men for something that they did. And yet somehow Pandora's the one who gets in trouble for it. And I'm like, that is not right. It's like stuck in my craw for a really long time. So Penelope, as we go through, we find out that Penelope has like a power that actually scares the gods a little bit because she can actually rewrite she's starting to learn this. She can make things right in a way that the gods don't necessarily like.
So
So that's the aftermath, which is why
how
it's
do
called
you,
after.
okay. So it's a series, and so
It
how do
is.
you pick each myth for each book?
Well, that's the thing, right? Like this one, like Pandora's Box is like a passion of mine, right? And so like I definitely wanted to start with that. And I'm actually kind of in the middle right now of just starting the like brainstorming process for the second book. And wanting to like it to be different, but also and we've got an idea of which one we want to do. I don't want to reveal it yet,
Hmm.
but it's kind of based on like as I'm looking at like the growth arc of the kids, as I'm looking at like the society in which we live, so I'm looking at all these things like what is the thing I really want to tackle, and how is it true to this like this herstory kind of feminist message that I've started that kind of goes through the Crave series, actually goes through like most of my work, and goes through Aftermath as well. And like, and how do I build on that? And what can I do? So I'm looking at a couple different myths, but I know three of the ones I'm doing. It's going to be like theoretically, it's a 6 book series, so I know like three. So there's a couple we're still debating on.
Was it hard to do the world building, or like,
I always say character is my favorite thing to do in the whole world. Like characters are, I mean, I love people. I'm a rare extroverted writer. So I like nothing more than sitting down with people and like picking their brain about absolutely everything. Like tell me everything about yourself. Which is why it's always weird for me when I'm the one who has to do the like the talking on this side. Um, but I don't know. I think that world building, I would, in the old days, I would say that world building was very, very hard for me. Like characters are easy, world building is hard. There's different doorways into story. Um, but I don't know. World building is actually one of the most fun things I do. It doesn't, I think, come as naturally as characters do to me. They just come really, really easily. But world building kind of comes in fits and spurts. Like I start with the main idea, and then it kind of evolves as I write. And that's what I have like kind of like really fun things where I'm like, oh right, of course, this is the Hall of Legends, and this is what happens over here. Or oh my gosh, the underworld isn't rivers, it's I can't tell you, it's blank. And people are like, the souls are, anyways, I'm very excited about the underworld. And like now we're starting like I'm starting with what does the campus look like this year? How do I change this up? One of my favorite things is the aftermath takes place in like Massachusetts, like in the Berkshires area. Um, and so up here, there's like all these like, little roadside like stops for eggs or cider donuts or whatever else. And the way into the campus in the first book is like a little apple cider donut stop. And you have to like eat the
that
like
sounds
donut. And
delicious.
she has no idea. She's just like, this is disgusting. Why are you making me eat this, mom and dad? And then, things are revealed. But so I kind of love that like there's like a different way in there's going to be a different way in every year. And just like I love the big world building is complex and all that, but like the little pieces, like they come to me as I'm writing, and that's one of my
Mhm.
favorite things, just like doing a lot of like little fun things that just make it a little different.
Okay, now hearing you say that you wrote while you had a small baby makes me feel very lazy. But I mean, how did you sustain it? Like, I mean, you write series of books. How do you sustain doing so many books?
Yeah, well, my joke is I say I don't sleep a lot, but it's actually true. Like, I think actually somebody I was recently in conversation with was like, "Oh my God, Tracy, you Pavloved your brain," and I realized that like in some ways, like that's actually the best way to describe like my writing schedule is bizarre to most people's. Like I'm not a like, oh, I write 3,000 words a day and then I'm
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
And
yeah. With the
I
goal
wish
sheets and all
that is
that. Yeah,
amazing, but that is not my process.
yeah,
And so I used to get up at like 4 in the morning, like when after that year when I was home with my son, I would get up at like 4 in the morning and I would write from like 4 to like 7:30 before I had to get everybody up and start doing the
yeah.
rounds for school and all of those things, and then get myself to my classes to teach. And I even to this day now, 4 to 7:30 is like my witching hour. Like it's perfect. It's
Yeah,
where
that's the
like
quiet time.
the
Yeah, before
stars
school.
align,
Yeah.
and I like will write like more words faster, better words in those 3.5 hours than I do all through the day. So I could like sit down at like 10 and try and write, and I would get like in the same 3.5 hours, I would get maybe a quarter of the words that I get from 4 to 7:30. And then also late at night, after the kids were in bed, I would sit back down, and those are my two most productive hours. During the day, like if I'm on deadline, I'm writing around the clock. But if I'm like just starting and discovering the world, those are the two times that I write the best. And then during the day, you do like, all the other work things that come with being a writer, and life things that come with being a mom and all that.
Yeah, it's funny because the first book I wrote was a East meets West vampire book. I couldn't find a publisher and agent, so I self-published that one. But like, I just joke that like my child is like the real vampire in my life. They just suck out all my energy, and then I can't do anything else.
Yeah,
I
like
love
it
I,
is, it
I
is a
love
lot.
books. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always sad in the mornings, even to this day, like on Saturdays if I'm up early and I'm writing and like whatever. And then like, oh, like, or Sundays, like where it's like, oh, it's time to make breakfast and the kids start, life starts stirring in the house. I'm always sad. I'm always like, let the teenagers sleep as long as they possibly can so
Oh,
that I can work as long as I possibly can. Cause I know that once I stop and I come back to it, like it's the flow just won't be there the same way that it is in those hours when I can like really pound out the words and pound out the story.
okay. Now you've written stories since childhood. What advice would you give to young writers who are just starting out?
I think that if you're talking about young writers just starting out, I think have fun. Like don't make it work. This is advice for my writing students, right? Like it's okay to just have fun with it. It's okay to like, even if you just write a little bit. One of the best pieces of advice I ever heard was a panel I was on. And unfortunately, I feel terrible because I do not remember this woman's name who was on the panel with me, who had said this. She'd had some really difficult life events happen in her
Mhm.
life. And it basically really stunted her. She got writer's block. She just couldn't write. She was just sad. She's like, all these things. I mean, it happens, right? Writing is a very emotional thing. And so anyway, what had helped her and what I thought was so brilliant is the idea of, again, I think it's in some ways it's like Pavloving your brain, where you're like, pick a really reasonable number of minutes that you can write every day or however many days. If it's 4 days a week, it's 4 days a week. If it's 7 days a week, it's 7 days a week, whatever it is. But keep a really, really manageable number. Um, and then just do it. And pretty soon writing becomes a habit. It becomes a muscle that you're
Mhm.
exercising, right? And like I always liken it to like if you're like, I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm starting back at the gym and I'm gonna go an hour and a half every day and I'm gonna be blah, 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 blah. And you do that for 3 days. And then the fourth day, I don't know, the kid gets sick, the dog throws up, something happens at work, whatever, and you don't make it. And then you feel a little worse. And then on the fifth day you go, but you don't have as much energy. And then something happens on the sixth day and you don't make it. Like mom needs you to come fix her internet, like whatever it is, right? And then you start to feel a little worse about yourself. So I say make yourself a manageable goal, whatever it is. And I always tell like my readers when they ask, I tell them like 5 minutes because everybody, barring really extenuating circumstances, has 5 minutes. Whether it's at the beginning when you open your eyes, whether it's right before you go to bed, whether it's on your lunch hour, whatever it is, you take 5 minutes. On a bad day, you set that timer, and when 5 minutes is done, you're freaking done. And this is like advice for writer's block too, right? Like even if it's like you're stuck, you can do 5 minutes, even if you throw it all away at the end, right? And on a good day, that 5 minutes is going to be 10 minutes or it's going to be 15
Mm.
minutes. And you can write a book in 5 and 10 minute increments. I have done it for, when I was a young mom, also working another job and, you know,
Cool. Okay. Now you've written over 70 books across different genres. So what's next for you after this release? I guess you're going to keep focusing on this series, your new series, right?
Yes,
I'm
I
guessing.
have the
So,
Alchemist series going on, absolutely. So I'm working on the second book of that. I have a new adult romantasy fantasy releasing with Red Tower in 2026 as well. And that is a kind of like cyberpunk. It's like a curse book, basically. It's like what happens if the currency of the world ran on curses instead of dollars.
mm,
And so it's kind of really like it's a fantasy world where you're looking at like power and the billionaire class and all of that, and I'm really I'm looking forward to I'm in the middle of it right now of finishing that up. And then I'm also in the middle of a YA series that's the spinoff to the Crave series right now. And that is the second book, Sweet Chaos, is coming out at the end of 2026. So I've got like basically what's going to be 3 different series going for different
Oh my
ages.
gosh. So Tracy, you're going to do a reading. Can you give us a bit of context before you start?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to do a reading from The Aftermath, which is the first book in my brand new middle grade series. And as Penelope Weaver, my main character, gets to school, everybody gets divided into one of 5 houses. Ruled by one of the Greek gods. And but to do that, you need to find this like gold drachma, this gold coin. And there's a coin meant for every student. And Penelope's coin is being exceptionally difficult, as everything at the school has been for Penelope. So anyway, that's kind of I'm gonna read her big like moment of getting her coin. Um, by the time I break through the tree line, my heart is pounding like a metronome on high. But I don't know if that's because of how fast I'm running or because I suddenly realize I'm not chasing a river at all. I'm chasing a waterfall. And not just any waterfall, one that appears to be upside down. The water running from the ground upward to the top of the cliff I'm standing on instead of the other way around. Even worse, hanging right over the top, or in this case, the bottom of the waterfall just out of reach, is my terrible, impossible, determined to ruin my life coin. I blink my eyes a couple times just to make sure I'm not hallucinating. But no, the more I blink, the clearer the coin becomes. It really is just hanging there in the open air, several feet above the top of an upside down waterfall. Like that's a thing, which it absolutely isn't. Water doesn't flow up, it flows down. Gravity demands that it happens that way. But I don't have time to worry about the laws of physics right now, not when I've got to figure out how to get my darn coin. I look around for something to hit it with that will knock it back toward me so I can grab it. Most of the branches on the ground are much too big for me to lift, but after wasting 2 precious minutes looking, I finally find a baby branch that I can not only lift, but actually swing around. However, no matter how hard I swing it or how high on my tippy toes I go, I can't quite reach the coin. It hasn't moved farther out, it hasn't lifted itself the way it did when I was on the back of the bench. No, this time it's staying perfectly still, gleaming in the sunlight and hanging just out of reach, almost like it's taunting me. Have I mentioned yet how much I hate this awful coin? If not, let this be my standing reminder. I hate the thing. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And if there is any other way to get into Athena Hall, I can assure you I would be taking it. Still, as I stand there glaring at the rotten thing, an idea comes to me. It's a wild idea, dangerous, impractical, and almost certainly completely unachievable, but it's also the only idea I've got left, and desperate times call for even more desperate measures. I'm definitely desperate. Very, very, very desperate. Besides, the waterfall isn't that big, and it's flowing upward. What's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, besides being crushed to death against the rocky side of the cliff, or getting pulled under the pounding current and drowning. Neither sounds like a good way to go, but walking back into that amphitheater without a coin, wherever the amphitheater is at this point, feels like an even worse idea. So I do the only thing I can do right now, the only thing that might have a chance of getting me that coin. I walk back to the edge of the forest, and then refusing to let myself think too much about it, I run straight for the edge of the cliff, straight for my coin. Heart pounding, brain racing, body pretty much screaming in terror. I wait until the last second, and then I jump upward as I throw myself off the cliff, arms and fingers straining as I try desperately to grab onto the coin for the second time today. I know the waterfall floors upward, I know that, and still I'm half convinced I'm about to plunge straight through the water to my death. More than half convinced, really. The laws of gravity are really hard to unlearn. But somehow, magically, I don't fall through the water. Instead, ice cold water shoots hard against my spine and legs, pushing me up, up, up. Within seconds, it's flowing around me before crashing back into my eyes, my nose, my mouth. I spit the water out, turning my head left and right in a frantic attempt not to drown in this mess of my own making, even as I try to figure out how any of this is possible. But the truth is, I don't need to know how it's possible or why it's happening. I just have to figure out how not to die, which I absolutely positively am going to do, because there's no way I'm going to let myself drown when I'm so close to finally finishing this thing. Still, close isn't all the way there, especially when I'm bouncing and bobbing around like an apple in a barrel at a Halloween party. I don't like it, so I keep trying to sit up, but every time I finally manage to get my shoulders off the massive wall of churning water beneath me, another current comes along and slams me right back down. Because of course it does. Nothing else about today has been easy. Why should this be? After several more attempts that all end with the same result, me spread-eagled and close to drowning, I finally decide to try something else. This time, instead of sitting up, I force myself to relax. Instead of fighting the current, I use its momentum to help me flip from my back to my stomach and immediately face plant into the water beneath me. The moment I do, the water slams into my mouth, down my throat, into my lungs. I turn my head, try to cough it up, and more water pours in. As I fight to recover, fight to breathe, I can't help thinking that jumping into this waterfall just might kill me. Somehow I manage to lift my head enough to spit the water back up. Once I do, I draw in a loud, strangled breath and try to look around as best I can. The water is still churning and everything around me looks frothy and white, but I'm still able to see more in this position than I could on my back. Mostly it's just rocky cliffs on either side and above me. But as I lift my head up again, I catch a flash of gold to my left. The coin. There it is, just to the left of me, almost within arm's reach. It seems impossibly hard to fight the water enough to actually reach it. But there has to be a way. There's no chance the administration would make a coin that couldn't be caught, would they? How's that?
Well, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
The Artsy Raven is produced by Dark Helix Press. Introduction voiceover by Chris Gorman. Music by Tim Moore. Please access your bonus content on the Patreon website. Thank you very much for listening, and please stay safe.